Welcome to another edition of Eye on the Issues. Today we're talking to the Secretary of State of the great state of Wyoming, Chuck Gray. Thanks for being here. Let's begin with, how's your day going?
Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So Chuck, the session, this current session that we just saw here, saw several election-related bills that were introduced with some failing to pass. Now, from your perspective as the Secretary of State, which proposals would have made the most meaningful improvement to Wyoming's election system?
We had a great bill on pen to paper ballots that we worked really diligently on in what's called the interim, the period between legislative sessions. That bill is part of President Trump's executive order on election integrity. Part of that executive order was a requirement that the Election Assistance Commission, the EAC, issue a pen to paper ballot requirement. Now, that is caught up in the EAC's processes. They need to get that to the finish line in compliance with President Trump's executive order. And in the meantime, we need to get this pen to paper ballot requirement done in Wyoming law. Ballots should not be cast with barcodes. No human being can read barcode. And when we have counties in the state of Wyoming where ballots are being printed out from a ballot marking device and then placed in a tabulator where the names on the ballot or ovals aren't cast in the ballot, but instead barcodes are based on a ballot marking device that is printing out a ballot based on the selections that are made, that is a huge problem. We also need to ban ballot harvesting in Wyoming. You have over 30 states that have banned ballot harvesting, and amazingly, Wyoming has nothing on the books on a ballot harvesting ban. That also needs to get done, and unfortunately, that was another bill that failed in this legislative session. Now, we also have a couple bills that are still out there that have a recount option that can be requested from candidates and are triggered automatically in certain situations. That's a concept that needs to get to the finish line. I'm a little concerned with how liberal the Wyoming State Senate has been. That unfortunately, I'm not sure those bills are going to get to the finish line, but we have 4 more days to try to get this done. We're at the point, though, where the Wyoming State Senate is failing bills. We had a very good piece of legislation that would have required witnesses be present when the clerk conducts what is called the post-election audit, which is an examination of the ballot images and making sure that the ballot images align with how the machine tabulated the ballot. And we had an instance up in Weston County in Wyoming, which is one of our counties, where it's in question whether the post-election audit was even conducted. And if it was, it did not find discrepancies that were later found. This piece of legislation that would have required witnesses be present only got 9 out of 31 votes on the floor of the Wyoming State Senate. And these members, some of them are using sort of lines that you would hear on MSNBC. It's like they have Trump derangement syndrome, saying that this is, quote unquote, they're claiming it's populism, when no, it is common sense election integrity measures that we're advancing forward. But we've gotten a lot done as well in past legislative sessions, and I look forward to talking a little more about that and some of the work we've done highlighting that around the nation and our nation's capital.
And well, tell us a little bit about that, because if you look at countries around the world, we don't have to drill down on any specific ones, but the way they hold their elections compared to what's happened in our country, it's almost like we've hit the slippery slope in some respects, and we really need to try to get back uphill.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, you do country to country comparisons. They have voter ID around their entire country. That is common sense. They have proof of citizenship for registering to vote. They do not allow dual citizens that have citizenship with a foreign adversary to vote. Those are all issues where in the United States, where the country is got some issues that need to be addressed. Now in Wyoming, we become a leader on many of these issues. I was the lead on the voter ID bill, which we passed in 2021 when I was a member of the state legislature. That was how I started getting involved in election integrity. And now as the chief election official of the state of Wyoming, the Wyoming Secretary of State, we passed a proof of citizenship for registering to vote bill. We banned foreign funding in our elections, all elections, including ballot measures, which is a loophole that is in place at the federal level. We banned third-party interference with our elections, often called zuck bucks. We banned that in our last legislative session. And then we also made sure that there was a ban in place for ranked choice voting because that should never become the law of the land. We've seen in states like Alaska where that is in place, or municipalities like New York City, that it is a woke clown show, this ranked choice voting system. These are all reforms that are in the Save America Act at the federal level and also the MEGA Act at the federal level. And what President Trump is working to get done is to put in place these baseline election integrity standards in federal law. It is so important we get that done because they're not going to pass in the blue states. I mean, we've become the leader in Wyoming, but Gavin Newsom, he did the opposite. He banned voter ID in the state of California because municipalities like Long Beach had put a voter ID requirement in place, and they banned that astoundingly, that Newsom character. It is so important that to take the radical left on, that we put these baseline election integrity standards in place at the federal level with the Save America Act, with the Make Elections Great Again Act. The MEGA Act is what it's called. I was invited to testify at the Congress 3 weeks ago about how Wyoming has implemented these baseline election integrity standards and why we need them at the federal level.
And Chuck, right now, how do you feel about the security of elections in Wyoming?
Well, I always believe that we need to focus on continued improvement. That is what I was elected to do. Not to say that everything's perfect, but to see where there are issues that need to be addressed. That's why we said, look, we need to ban ballot harvesting in Wyoming. We've been working for 3 years to try to get this through, but astoundingly, a lot of these insider politicians who ally themselves with the Democrats have stopped that common sense election integrity bill. Same with pen to paper ballots. I mean, we were way ahead of the curve on this, just like on proof of citizenship for registering to vote. We were talking about this in 2022, 2023, before this really came to the forefront. And we need to get them to the finish line on top of the ones that we have signed into law.
Now, Chuck, your office also oversees business registration, corporate filings. How would you assess Wyoming's current business filing environment? Is it efficient and competitive compared to other states around the country?
Well, Wyoming has become a leader in corporations. We have the highest per capita incorporation rate in the nation. We're very efficient. We answer the phones. We provide great value. And we have a 15-day certain in Wyoming state law that we have to respond to the filing. So none of this nonsense in some of these other states where it will take weeks, even months for filings to be responded to. We have 15 business days, and we ensure that that response is provided. Now, one of the bills that is going through the legislature will also provide an expedited option so that businesses, individuals that need a date certain for their filing to be completed can expedite that filing on top of the 15-day certain requirement that is in Wyoming state law. We basically do 75% of the volume that Delaware does with 10% of the staff, and we're very proud of that. This has become one of the few revenue centers, one of the few agencies that is a revenue center in the state of Wyoming, so that we can keep our taxes low for the people of Wyoming, lower property tax, make sure that these just out of control increases that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years, that those are reversed, and make sure that working families, that their standard of living increases by decreasing the tax burden. And we're proud to have paid for that, helped pay for that through the enormous business growth that has been done. At the same time, we have seen the need for us to take on business fraud, and that has been a key priority of our administration. I really wanted to go in a different direction from my predecessors, who often said, hey, nothing to see here. No, this is an area that we need to take seriously and need to address, as President Trump's administration is doing with this great work that Vice President Vance was appointed to lead, this anti-fraud task force. So we stood up a process that was previously never used, that was in Wyoming state law, which allows for dissolution of entities that are, if it is in the public interest for those entities to be dissolved, and if they have filed fraudulent filings with our office. And that led to an historic dissolution in a partnership with the FBI of 3 entities that were tied to North Korea. Now, I often say, we took on North Korea and we won. We dissolved those entities that were tied to North Korea, and then we also stood up a number of statutory changes in the 2025 legislative session to take on business fraud. One of those is allowing us to dissolve entities that are owned or controlled by a foreign adversary, just straight off the bat, and then also allowing us to dissolve any entities when there is false information filed with their registered agent. So those were statutory improvements that we brought through the legislative session in 2025, and there's more work to be done. And we're looking forward in the period in between the end of the 2026 budget session and the start of the 2027 general session for a working group that we're going to conduct with the legislature on further statutory improvements.
Very nice. Now, Chuck, as Wyoming talks more about economic diversification, if you will, and growth, what role does the Secretary of State office play in making the state more attractive or possibly unattractive?
Well, we're sort of the one-stop shop for business interaction for our state. That's where businesses incorporate. And so we believe that we need to be business friendly. And that is shown by the enormous growth in our incorporations. We also oversee stockbrokers and broker dealers. The Secretary of State is the chief securities official of the state of Wyoming. And then the boards that I sit on as the chief election official, one of the 5 statewide electeds, and also the Secretary of State is one of the states where the Secretary of State is the lieutenant governor of the state of Wyoming. It's the second in command. So in that role, I sit on both the State Board of Land Commissioners and the State Loan and Investment Board. The State Board of Land Commissioners oversees all of our state lands in Wyoming. And we need to make sure that we are promoting and being friendly to our core coal, oil and gas, soda ash, ag industries, which are the backbones of Wyoming's economy. And we need to be making sure that this Biden-Obama subsidies for woke wind, that they do not gain traction in Wyoming. I call it woke wind because it has been placed on an uneven playing field from these outrageously wrong Obama-Biden subsidies. Woke wind is wrong for Wyoming. And in our role in the State Board of Land Commissioners, we actually undid a state lease, took the lead on that to try to go after one of these just ESG driven projects that they were trying to plop down in Wyoming. Now, Mike, you're going to be shocked by what this Spanish conglomerate wanted to do in Wyoming. They didn't want to just take wind, as bad enough as that is how uneven the playing field is on that with the Obama Biden subsidies. They wanted to take the wind to produce hydrogen, which is a water intensive process. And then from there, they were going to produce synthetic jet fuel, pipe it down to Denver International Airport, and use that synthetic jet fuel for woke billionaires like Hans-Jörg Wyss, so that they could brag to their billionaire friends when they take their private jets to Davos, claiming that they're green. Now, that does not sound like a project which is in any way consistent with our values. In fact, it is totally inconsistent with our values. And it certainly doesn't sound efficient either. It is not an efficient project because it is totally on an uneven playing field with these Obama Biden subsidies. That's why they're putting it forward. So we led an effort to try to stop this project. And on a 3-2 vote of the Wyoming State Board of Land Commissioners, we were able to stop this woke wind project last month. So that's just an example of what we're doing to make sure that that our core industries, coal, oil and gas, and ag and soda ash, that all these attempts from the radical left to try to attack our core industries, that those aren't successful. Because of course, using that example, there's a good old-fashioned way to produce jet fuel in Wyoming, and that is a good old-fashioned oil and gas lease. That's what our State Board of Land Commissioners should be promoting, not this ESG-driven nonsense that Governor Mark Gordon and a lot of his left-wing allies have been trying to promote in our state. That is totally inconsistent with our values.
Almost unbelievable what you just mentioned there.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Chuck, what have I not asked you that you want to mention? What do you want to talk about? Anything else?
Well, we're continuing to bring our election integrity message national here, and look forward to continuing to serve, and looking forward to the 26th election cycle, and really appreciate you having me on to talk about these issues and our work for the people of Wyoming and promoting the will of the people of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Chuck, sounds like you're doing great work. And folks out there, if you want to find out more about what's happening around the state of Wyoming, just go to wyliberty.org, sign up for our newsletter. Chuck, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon about, let's say, another topic.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
You bet. Take care.